When we talk about music theory, especially in the Americas and Europe, we're generally talking about how 18th century European musicians would write music, and that's carried through to today without much deviation. Because of this, we subscribe to 12 chromatic tones, or half steps between octaves. An octave is two notes that have the same pitch but at a higher or lower frequency. For example, A440 vibrates at 440 beats per second. A880 vibrates at 880 beats per second. They're both A's, but they are separated by an octave. We also have major scales where the notes have been tempered to a specific frequency to allow 7 tones to fit inside an octave, also known as the heptatonic scale. Hepta meaning 7, tonic meaning tone or note. All the major scales follow the same interval pattern. From the first note to the second is a whole step. Between the second and third note is another whole step. The third interval is a half step, followed by 3 more whole steps and a half step to the octave. One of the only instruments that shows the actual notes is the piano, where you can see every note that can be played. Guitar is also similar, but the notes don't look the same like they do on a piano keyboard. Because of its mathematical attributes, we can learn more in depth about music if we think of it as a math. One of these ways is to learn about the order of sharps and flats, which you could say is mathematically rendered. Learning the order of sharps and flats is a great way to learn scales and keys. Instead of reading the scales off a page and trying to learn it that way, you can think about the order of sharps and flats. If you're like me, you like playing white notes on the piano. But this holds us back from greater musical abilities. Knowing your C scale on your instrument, concert B flat for trumpets, is super easy because there are no sharps or flats. Starting with the order of sharps, we start with 1 sharp. Have you ever played music that has 1 sharp in the key signature? Do you remember what it was? It should always be F sharp, because F sharp is the first sharp in the order of sharps. If there is ever a single sharp in the key signature, it should always be F sharp. There may be some very rare exceptions, maybe if you're Charles Ives. The order of sharps is F, C, G, D, A, E, B. Now that we know the order, we can play any major scale in major key. If you played a scale with a single sharp, F sharp, you would be playing in G major. How do I know this? The first note of a major scale is called the tonic, and the 7th note, or next to last note in the scale, is called the leading tone, because it leads to the tonic in the next octave. In a major scale, the leading tone is always a half step away from the next tonic. The order of sharps shows us the leading tone with the last sharp in the key signature. For example, if we were playing in a major key with 3 sharps, which would be F, C, and G, the last sharp, G sharp, is the leading tone. So what is the next note after G sharp? A. We're playing in the key of A major. The order of flats is a little different, but the way you can remember the order of flats is pretty interesting. It's the exact inverse, or reverse order, of the order of sharps. That's a little math. B, E, A, D, G, C, F. It's probably easier to remember the order of flats because it spells bead, B-E-A-D, and then you can think greatest common factor for GCF, which is another math term. The flats do not indicate the leading tone as the order of sharps do. However, as long as you have 2 or more flats, you can still figure out the key. The only key signature to remember would be the one with 1 flat, the key of F. After that, if we have B flat and E flat, we look at the next to last flat in the key signature, and that will tell us the key. For example, if we have 2 flats in our key signature, B flat and E flat, the next to last flat is the key, so we would be in the key of B flat. If we had 4 flats, B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat, the next to last flat is A flat, and we would be in the key of A flat. Don't forget to add the flat into these keys. It's not the key of A, but A flat. Now that we know the order of sharps and flats, we can think about our scales. Since C was the easiest scale to play, let's apply it to this. For the key of G, we have 1 sharp, F sharp. Because we know the C scale and it has no flats and sharps, and G has one sharp, why don't we just add F sharp and start on G instead of C? We're playing the C scale with an F sharp and just starting on G. You could also just play the G scale within the C octave. It's still the G major scale, it just doesn't start on the tonic. Because we are forcing ourselves to use our brains to learn the scales this way, we are enhancing our musicianship. Reading scales off a sheet can work, but it'll probably take longer, and you're not learning about the scales themselves and how they relate to other scales. So when you're working on scales, have the order of flats and sharps in front of you. Think about the steps to find the key. It is true, however, that minor keys will also have the key signatures that major keys have. One way to know if the key is major or minor would be to look at the last note of a piece you're working on. The last note in the piece is typically, but definitely not always, the tonic of the piece, or the first note of the scale that the piece is in. If we had 3 flats, and the last note in the piece is E flat, the key is probably E flat major. But if the key has 3 flats, and the last note is C, it's probably in C minor. We'll probably get into minor scales next time.